We're back, and in this show, what does Microsoft's ARM development mean for Apple? Can the MacBook Pro 13-inch be fixed? Solid-state iPhone buttons? Titanium's big comeback? What the is happening in social media? January Apple events? And is it time for Beyond M2, the follow-up to my biggest video ever? Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell. And in this video, as usual, because news isn't a thing anymore for Apple, we are answering your questions. But first, yesterday we did a live stream video of me gaming for the first time, which is very exciting for me because I get to play a computer game, and you guys apparently enjoyed watching it, the guys that actually turned up. Not many of you. Judgment is happening. However, a few people were asking how the MacBook Air kind of dealt with it, because obviously we were doing reasonably demanding gaming. Although it's quite an old game, Kerbal Space Program, we were basically recreating the Artemis 1 mission that happened yesterday morning, at least in UK time. People wanted to know how it held up in terms of, gaming as well as streaming and all the other stuff that it was having to do at the same time. And yeah, it did a really good job. People were asking what the spec is. So it's the 512 gigabytes of storage model with 8 gigs of unified memory. So it's the base model in terms of memory. Generally, performance is the base model. There's no kind of upgrades in terms of that sort of thing, apart from perhaps that 512 gigs of storage, because obviously that's what splits the storage, so you get the quicker access to that. But the cores never got above 65 degrees, so pretty good on that point. And to be fair, this thing was running the game in 1080p. In the higher settings, it was also encoding that and receiving this kind of video from my iPhone, which was wirelessly transmitting for continuity camera and the microphone, sending all of that to YouTube and running the chat and all that sort of stuff. And it never got above 65 degrees, which I think is a win. Yeah, pretty good. By the way, all of that was through Rosetta as well, because this game is not optimized for Apple Silicon. But into your questions anyway. Team Kinetix asks, I have answers now that Microsoft have released their ARM development kit and the new Surface has Microsoft SQ1 ARM-based processor. Do you think we'll see more developers making native Apple Silicon apps? I'm not a developer, but I'm guessing it's easier to port from Microsoft ARM to Apple Silicon than x86 to Apple Silicon. Also, how much longer do you think x86 processors will have in the consumer market? Well, let's be honest, the vast majority of kind of server-based stuff has moved already over to ARM because of the lower power consumption and basically all of those good things that ARM brings. They use so much less power. So consumer PCs is basically the only place that x86 still exists. There are still pro applications, but yeah, time is limited for them. In terms of the ARM development stuff, I think it'll be good that everyone's kind of moving over to it, so it's a simplified instruction set rather than the more complex stuff for x86. But let's remember that Rosetta is already set up for x86 to ARM. I don't know how close it's going to be, because the bigger problems for things coming from Windows to ARM for the Mac is things like DirectX. Stuff like crossover works quite well. I'm going to probably invest some time in that in the near future. But for now, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. But let me know what you think in the comments. x86 is on its way out though, and that's going to hurt Intel big time. Next up, L Christian 771 asks, I have answers. I have an idea for how Apple could make the MacBook Pro 13-inch better. Apple could do the same thing that they do with their iPad Air and iPad Pro. For example, it could just be a MacBook Air, but with the following: slightly thinner bezels, 13.7 inches, 120Hz ProMotion, mini LED, faster ports, better speakers and mics. Keep in mind that I'm not talking about the MacBook Pro 14-inch, but rather a MacBook Air with extra features carried over from the iPad Pro. What are your thoughts? It's an interesting thought, but I think the way that Apple is likely to go is going to that 15-inch MacBook Air rather than making the 13-inch MacBook Air very slightly bigger. I never quite understood why Apple had a different display for the 10.9-inch iPad Air and the 11-inch iPad Pro. It's so close, it makes almost no difference. The panel itself, the only difference is the ProMotion, so I guess if you're making a different panel for that anyway, that makes sense. And obviously that panel as well is the one that's then probably transitioned over to the new iPad. that's at the lower price, but not really as low as it should be for the 10th generation, but it's a very confusing thing. And then that display on that iPad isn't laminated, so that's just more component costs, and it's very strange what Apple's doing right now. I would say that the 13-inch MacBook Pro just needs to die. The difference between 13.7 inches and 14 inches, not enough to have two different models. Just kill it. Kill it. The MacBook Air is absolutely adequate, as we've just mentioned. In terms of gaming, it's absolutely fine for kind of basic stuff that more people want to do. If you want to really go into gaming, most people will buy a console if they're not into specifically PC gaming. If you're buying a Mac, you're not buying it for gaming anyway. 120Hz ProMotion, I guess it's nice, but I don't notice it on the iPhone 14 Pro. It's a kind of a non-feature for me. I'm sure some people really like it. And I'm not sure that the lid of the MacBook Air is actually deep enough to hold a mini LED display. Could be wrong there. Team Kinetix asks, IK answers, if Apple replaces the volume and lock buttons with solid-state buttons as rumoured, what do you think they'll do with the silent switch? And this is a really good question, because there is that kind of physical click-click switch that moves side to side on the iPhones right now. I can't see them keeping that if they're not going to have physically clickable buttons, but they're going to go for more the Taptic engine behind it. So I think you could get rid of that. You can put that purely into software in Control Center. That wouldn't be a big bind for most people. But also you could just turn your volume all the way down, and that could be the equivalent, you know, one more step at the bottom of your volume rocker, and that basically makes it that. However, the one thing that I do think is a very interesting point is, if you're going to make all of your switches solid state, why are you going to keep a hole in the bottom of your phone? I think Dave 2D and Marquez could be right. This is going against John Prosser and Sam Cole about the USB-C thing. I think they might just go completely portless, because that still complies with the European Union laws. The last episode of Genius Bar was very confusing. Sam seemed to think that to comply, they were talking about going to two different versions of the phone, one with USB-C and one with Lightning. No, that this would be all of the phones not having a hole in them anymore, and everything just being MagSafe. I think that's what John was trying to say, but Sam didn't seem to get it. James Apple asks, IK answers, will the iPhone 15 Ultra have a titanium finish rather than a stainless steel finish like its Apple Watch Ultra wife? Yes, probably. That was a pretty quick answer. Apple's been looking at titanium for quite some time, including colouring it. I think it makes a lot of sense. The biggest complaint that a lot of people have about the iPhone Pro is that it's too heavy, and titanium will fix that. Evan Rogers, IK answers, thoughts on the current social media landscape? Do you have plans to move to Mastodon, etc.? So I have got an account on Mastodon. It's at iCaveDave at mastodon.social, I think. I'll put it down here in the image so you can see. But I think that's what it is. I'm not leaving Twitter. My thoughts on it, though, it seems that Elon is actually talking about getting someone else to run Twitter on his behalf. Either he's given up, he's realised that he has not a clue what he's doing there, or he never planned to kind of run it long term in the first place. Could be either. Things are changing, though. The biggest change that we've had so far in social media for a long time is the TikTokification. This is a word that Gary Vee's used, and it's basically the fact that pretty much all of social media is now not about how many people follow you, but what their interests are. So you will be served stuff on a lot of social platforms based on the content rather than whether you follow that person or you've interacted with their stuff in the past. James Apple says, are we getting our January event? I know the AR VR headset has to be shown off to get developers working, or even for the new big HomePods. I think the January event is happening. I think we might be getting the MacBook Pros that we were sort of promised. We weren't promised, but we might have been promised in November. I think that might be when they get introduced. I think they're already in production. We've heard this already. So chances are that's when we'll see them. I really hope it's going to be January, because that'll keep me busy for a bit. And Evan Rogers asks, is it time for Beyond M2? Now, Beyond M1 was probably one of the biggest videos that I've done. It might still be the biggest that I've done on the channel. There was another one about whether Intel should be terrified or not. It was 50-something thousand views, which for me is huge. Yes, I think we should do something about Beyond M2. We'll be talking about the performance that we're going to get potentially from 4nm and 3nm processors. but also how long those are going to take, because I think the vast majority of YouTubers are pretty wrong about this. Also coming up in the next couple of days, we are going to be putting the display into the Project 91, which is my Macintosh Classic, which is actually built in 1992, but it was released in 91, so that's where the project name comes there. And then we're going to be putting M1 inside it, and it's going to become my kind of home server, storage solution, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be pretty fun. The first episode is already up, and you can see it just up here. So, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Want the latest Apple news, leaks, and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.